So, welcome to today's deep dive. It is Monday, March 23rd, 2026, and I am really excited about this one.
Yeah, me too. We've got some wild source material to go through today.
We really do. So, for you listening, today's source is this incredibly comprehensive historical overview of the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution.
Right. The women's right to vote.
Exactly. And our mission today is basically to rescue this history from those dusty, totally sanitized textbook summaries we all grew up with.
Oh, absolutely. The textbooks make it seem so neat and tidy.
They really do.
Yeah.
You picture this polite, linear progression of progress, just women holding signs, and then boom, they get the vote. But the source reveals it was actually this grueling, chaotic battle.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about real political warfare here.
Right. Hunger strikes, political hostage situations, Supreme Court showdowns, and some really bitter racial compromises. Okay, let's unpack this, because this isn't just a history lesson, it's really a masterclass in political strategy.
It is. It's about what it actually takes to force a massive system to change.
Exactly. So where do we even start?
Well, before we look at how the suffragists won the vote, we have to establish that they were actually trying to win it back.
Wait, win it back?
Yeah. See, the 1789 Constitution basically punted on the issue. It left voting boundaries entirely undefined.
Oh, right. So they just let the states figure it out.
Exactly. And because of that, women actually did vote in several pre-revolutionary colonies. Like New Jersey allowed single and married women to vote for years.
Okay, until they arbitrarily rescinded it in 1807.
Oh, right. That is so frustrating. It's like a terrible software patch update that just rolled back a crucial feature.
That is exactly what it was. And, everyone points to the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848 as the starting line. But there's this surprising influence from the Seneca Nation, the Iroquois Confederacy.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, women there held immense political power. They could even veto acts of war.
That is incredible. Just witnessing an actual government where women could veto a war must have totally shifted the paradigm for those early activists. Completely. But translating that into American law was a nightmare. Fast forward past the Civil War, they tried this thing called the New Departure Strategy.
Right, using the 14th and 15th Amendments. They basically argued that citizenship already guaranteed women the right to vote.
Exactly. They said, hey, we're citizens, so we get to vote. But the Supreme Court totally crushed that in 1874 with Minor v. Happersett.
Right. But, let me push back on that strategy for a second. Wasn't trying to use the 14th Amendment a massive legal reach at the time, considering Section 2 explicitly penalized states for depriving male citizens of the vote?
Well, yeah, it was a reach. And the Supreme Court ruled exactly on those lines. They said citizenship did not automatically grant voting privileges.
So the legal route is basically a dead end at the highest court.
Totally dead, which meant they needed a brand new constitutional amendment.
And that causes a huge fracture in the movement, right? Like, do they play nice or do they make a huge scene?
Exactly. It's a massive split. You've got these two-pronged attacks that ultimately forced President Woodrow Wilson's hand.
Okay, break that down for us. Who was on which side?
So on one side, you have Carrie Chapman Catt and the NASI. They had this winning plan.
Right, and when World War I broke out, Catt made the controversial choice to support the war effort.
She did. She argued that because women were sacrificing in the labor force and as nurses, they were proving they deserved enfranchisement.
It's the polite, patriotic route.
Exactly. But then on the other side, you have Alice Paul, Lucy Burns, and the National Woman's Party, the NWP.
And they were not playing nice.
Not at all. They used World War I to highlight the total hypocrisy of fighting for democracy abroad while denying it to 26 million women at home.
They were the silent sentinels, right?
Yeah.
Picketing outside the White House.
Yes. And the consequences were brutal. 168 protesters were arrested and sent to the Lorton prison in Virginia.
Which is just awful.
It was horrific. They endured hunger strikes and forced feedings by the guards.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This dynamic feels so much like a classic good cop, bad cop routine.
Oh, totally.
But I have to ask, did the militant tactics of Alice Paul actually help? Or did they risk alienating the public and sabotaging the political groundwork Catt was laying?
What's fascinating here is that both were actually necessary.
Really? Both of them?
Yeah. The NWP, Alice Paul's group, they generated this urgent, unavoidable public pressure. They made it an emergency.
While Catt was schmoozing the politicians.
Exactly. Na Sophie provided the acceptable political off-ramp. Politicians could cave to Catt to avoid dealing with Paul.
Man, that is brilliant strategy. But that desperation, to pass the amendment, to get those final votes, it required winning over Southern Democrats.
Right, and this is where the history gets really dark.
It does. We just have to look at the facts here objectively.
Sure.
The fight for suffrage became deeply, deeply entangled with race.
It really did. White suffragists were desperate for Southern votes, so they adopted strategies that actively marginalized black women.
Yeah, they basically argued that white women's votes could counter the black vote.
Exactly. It was a calculated compromise. Like during the massive 1913 Washington, D.C. parade, black women were literally instructed to march at the back.
Just to avoid upsetting these Southern delegates.
Yeah. But the defiance from black suffragists was incredible. Ida B. Wells flatly refused to march in the back.
She just joined the Illinois unit anyway.
She did.
You're right.
Just step right into the crowd. And you had leaders like Mary Church Terrell leading the massive National Association of Colored Women.
There's that quote from the source from activist Nannie Helen Burroughs. Someone asked what a black woman could do with a ballot, and she just pointedly replied, "What can she do without it?"
It's such a powerful quote.
It really is. And for you listening, I mean, think about the ethics of this. This looks like a ruthless ends justify the means political bargain. Did the white suffrage leadership believe they were making a necessary evil to pass the amendment? Or does this highlight a fundamental flaw in how single-issue political movements operate?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it really shows how movements often fracture. Well, the broader definition of equality often clashes directly with the immediate mathematical goal of a legislative victory.
Right, you need a certain number of votes, so you throw your most vulnerable members under the bus to get them.
Exactly. It's harsh, but it's what happened. And all of this strategic plotting and racial maneuvering, it all comes down to one final, incredibly dramatic battleground.
Oh, Tennessee. The War of the Roses.
Yes. By August 1920, they had 35 states. They needed 36. Tennessee was the tiebreaker.
So both sides just totally descend on Nashville.
It was chaos. Supporters wore yellow roses on their lapels, and the anti-suffragists, the antis, wore red roses.
And the vote in the Tennessee House was completely deadlocked, 48 to 48.
Right down to the wire.
Okay.
And there was this 24-year-old representative named Harry Byrne.
He had initially voted to table the resolution, right, wearing a red rose?
He did. But in the final minutes, before the binding vote, he received a note.
From his mom.
Yes, a handwritten note from his mother urging him to be a good boy and vote yes.
That is just unbelievable.
I know. He shocked everyone, changed his vote, and the amendment passed.
But the antis didn't just give up, did they?
Nope. In a final act of desperation, 37 anti-suffrage legislators literally fled the state.
They got on a train to Decatur, Alabama.
Yeah, just to prevent a quorum so the vote can be certified.
It's literally like a sports team walking off the field to avoid losing the game.
It completely is.
I have to marvel at the irony here. After decades of Supreme Court battles, hunger strikes, and all these intense political machinations, the fate of 26 million women came down to a 24-year-old listening to a text message, or rather a handwritten note from his mom.
It's one of the craziest turning points in American history. But, the ploy to flee the state failed. On August 18, 1920, the amendment officially passed.
Victory. But as the source shows, the dramatic victory in Tennessee wasn't a magic wand.
Not at all. The very next day, the system fought back. Opponents immediately sued.
But the Supreme Court upheld it, right? In Lizzer v. Garnett in 1922.
They did, unanimously, which finally allowed women in places like Maryland to register. But the politicians themselves were terrified.
Oh, yeah, they were terrified of this massive new women's voting bloc, right?
Exactly. They thought all women would vote exactly the same way. So they rushed to pass the Shepherd-Towner Maternity Act in 1921 just to appease them.
But they quickly realized that bloc didn't actually exist. Women didn't vote as a single monolith.
Nope. In 1920, only 36% of eligible women actually voted.
Compared to, what, 68% of men?
Yeah. They were deterred by literacy tests, residency requirements, and just general inexperience with the system.
And the limitations were incredibly severe for minority women. The amendment totally failed to enfranchise millions of them.
It really did. Black women in the South faced outright fraud, poll taxes, and severe violence.
Like the beatings in Birmingham in 1926.
Exactly. And that violence and suppression continued all the way until the 1965 Voting Rights Act.
Decades later. And it wasn't just black women either.
Right. No. Native Americans and Asian Americans faced their own distinct federal and state barriers for decades more.
So what does this all mean? I mean, it's like being handed the keys to a car, only to realize the engine has been removed.
That's a great way to put it.
Why do we teach the 19th Amendment as the end of the story when the source material clearly shows it was just the closing of one chapter and the opening of an even harder one for minority women?
Because it's a comfortable narrative, but it's just not the whole truth.
Right. So for you listening, I think what this deep dive really reveals is that achieving a monumental shift in society is never clean.
It requires a really messy blend of radical disruption, polite lobbying, and unfortunately, some really harsh compromises.
It's a stark reminder that progress is rarely a straight line.
This raises an important question, though. Alice Paul, the radical organizer, she knew the 19th Amendment wasn't enough.
She did.
Just months after its passage in 1921, she drafted the Equal Rights Amendment, the ERA, to eliminate all legal inequalities based on sex.
But the source notes that despite actually passing Congress in the 1970s, it never met the ratification deadline.
Right. It remains entirely disputed and unpassed today, over a century later.
Which is wild.
Yeah.
And it brings up a huge point. What happens to a movement's momentum when it achieves its primary singular goal?
It's a tough question.
Does the victory of the 19th Amendment show us that when a society checks a box and says we fixed it, the machinery of inequality just quietly adapts, making the next phase of the fight, like the ERA, infinitely harder to win?
That is definitely something to think about.
Something for you to mull over as we wrap up today. Thank you so much for taking this deep dive into the source material with us. We'll see you next time.